Relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The fallout from this past weekend's action, the Skye Nicholson versus Tania Alvarez fight in particular. Fight to be Fit Inc., who helps to train unbeaten up-and-comer from Canada, Bree Howling.
I think they also happen to be Errol Spence and Regis Prograrius, his strength and conditioning coach.
Fight to be Fit Inc. reacted to Skye Nicholson's performance opposite the ring, Tania Alvarez, saying Matchroom should be embarrassed with how they handle these matchups for Skye Nicholson. The matchmakers should be ashamed of their matchup at such an iconic venue like Madison Square Garden. Her opponents are getting worse, not better.
Ouch.
And it's easy to see why they didn't want to fight Bree a couple of fights ago. Bree's pressure would break her easily.
Bree Howling, an unbeaten up-and-comer from Canada, I actually had the good fortune of speaking to some months ago, who detailed what it is that Fight to be Fit Inc. is talking about.
But I never knew what happened with the Nicholson fight, so can you tell us what happened with that?
Well, obviously there's been a lot of hearsay, and that happens in boxing. When somebody says something, it just flows like fire. But basically, we were supposed to fight in March in San Diego, and I was all geared up to go. They had offered it to me about 5 weeks prior, and it's 4 weight classes up because I am actually a bantamweight fighter. I'm a 118-pound fighter. But within 5 minutes, I said yes because I had been inactive for a long time, and I thought that this was a good way to get back out. And then in camp, we're about 2 weeks out, and all of a sudden, like, things just fall apart, and they decide to go a different way. The promotion says, we're going to choose a different opponent, and we want to put you and Skye on the MSG fight card with Katie Taylor. So I said, okay. Obviously, like, going to MSG and fighting on that undercard was an amazing opportunity, so of course they said yes to that. So I went back into camp. We were waiting for the contract to come after her March fight, and then again things fell apart. Apparently Skye was saying that I had put something up online that had pissed her off or something, and then said she didn't want to fight me anymore. So then everything fell apart. But she's online saying, oh, Bree backed out, all that kind of stuff. She doesn't want that smoke. I never backed out of anything. I was in fight camp the whole time. I was ready to fight, and she's the one who said no twice. So
that's Bree's side of the story. Bree Howling, who sports a professional record of 4 wins, no losses, and no draws. No recorded knockouts, not yet. But she's a very put-together fighter.
Certainly more put together to the eye than Tania Alvarez was.
As stated, Bree Howling was set to face Skye Nicholson some months ago, last year, and for some reason, one reason or another, the fight fell apart. We got Bree's side of the story, but I don't think Skye was ever actually asked what happened to that fight.
What's her side of the story?
And just based on Team Howling's reaction, you get the sense they feel raw about the fight falling apart, and they feel that they have unfinished business with Skye Nicholson.
How they rate her performance against then unbeaten Tania Alvarez this past weekend.
My thoughts.
It does seem a bit fortuitous that Skye Nicholson didn't face Bree Howling back when they were supposed to fight, because even though Bree Howling has less fights than Skye and less fights than Tania, and she is less active than both.
She is a better fighter than Tania Alvarez. She is a more put-together fighter than Tania Alvarez.
Initially, when the fight was tabbed, I said it myself. This is a hell of an acid test for Skye Nicholson, and are the people at Matchroom sure they want to go through with this? Because if they do, could be an upset.
So I understand why Team Howling, Fight to be Fit Inc. might feel that Skye Nicholson circumvented Bree Howling, or at least someone circumvented Bree on her behalf, and maybe that's the case.
Maybe. We don't know the full story.
The saving grace for both Skye Nicholson and Bree Howling is that they're both young fighters. Skye's only 27, Bree Howling's only 24. There's still plenty of time for them to eventually meet sometime down the line.
They're both garnering professional experience, making their bones as professionals. Skye was in action this past weekend.
Bree Howling is set to return to action later on this year, next month on the 18th, against an opponent that is yet to be announced in what is being billed as a 4-rounder.
Plenty of time for them to eventually have a fight with each other when they're more experienced fighters.
Experience. That's what this past weekend's fight was all about. I won't lie to you, I wasn't overly impressed with what we got from Skye Nicholson. Don't get me wrong, she lived up to my expectations. The prediction stuck, and she was able to box from the outside behind straight punches, moving and turning Tania Alvarez.
Keeping her moving.
She won. But I think Skye Nicholson's limitations were on full display, the same as Tania's, where
Tania's missing a couple of things, but so is Skye.
And at this stage in their careers, it's not the end of the world that there's more work needs doing for either Tania Alvarez or Skye Nicholson.
It's very early.
Where Tania Alvarez has a lot of things that she needs to work on, like slipping the jab or catching and shooting the jab, working off the counter as she closes the distance, cutting the ring off against a moving target. Where she has these things that she needs to work on, Skye's got some things that she needs to work on as well, because she doesn't look comfortable boxing on the inside.
That's okay. That's okay for now.
It's all right. This past weekend's fight, believe it or not, was a necessary homework assignment, because Skye Nicholson, being that pure boxer, she needs to learn to work under pressure. And Tania Alvarez, she certainly isn't the best pressure fighter.
She is a pressure fighter.
What she is, making this past weekend's fight, believe it or not, a necessary homework assignment. Pressure fight is a pure boxer's kryptonite more often than not. The saving grace for Skye Nicholson, opposite the ring Tania, is that Tania is several levels below Skye Nicholson.
Tania had the right base style. She's just missing a few ingredients.
This is what you want to do to a pure boxer. You want to keep them under pressure, force them to work, tire them out. A battle of attrition.
That was a good learning experience for Tania Alvarez, but it was also a good learning experience for Skye Nicholson.
It's really not the end of the world that after just 1 year as a professional boxer, Skye Nicholson's got a few things she needs to work on. How to put punches together whilst boxing on the fly and keeping the opponent at arm's length, and
Not be limited to just shooting singles from the outside.
she needs to learn how to handle herself mid-range to inside as well, because she doesn't look too comfortable boxing there, which results in a lot of wrestling, a lot of clinching.
But I mean, that's all right. That's what these early fights are for.
I certainly wouldn't mind seeing Bree Howling and Skye Nicholson settle up with each other a few fights from now.
I vaguely recall Bree Howling entering into a promotional deal with the fledgling promotional outfit Pro Bellum that doesn't have a broadcast partner. Her next fight doesn't look like it's a Pro Bellum promotion.
Set to go down up there in Nova Scotia, north of the border. I don't know if Bree Howling's still with Pro Bellum.
She might not be.
She's a very good fighter with a more fan-friendly style, at least more fan-friendly than Skye Nicholson's.
She's going to be fighting real soon, next month.
Perhaps she should look into pairing up with either Lee Baxter Promotions in Canada or Yvonne Michelle Gym, perhaps Eye of the Tiger Management.
She'd fit right in. She's a good fucking fighter.
We'll see what happens. In men's flyweight and super flyweight news, the word from out of Japan. Former WBO flyweight champion Junto Nakatani, who is aiming for a two-weight championship, is closing in on the deadline for negotiations with reigning WBO champion Kazuto Ioka, but no progress has been made. This is a very dangerous fight for four-division champion Kazuto Ioka. In front of him,
This is a very similar situation to what we saw in 2020 when three-division champion Kosei Tanaka, reigning WBO champion, moved up in weight to super flyweight to challenge Kazuto for his WBO title.
and Kazuto took him to school. Kazuto put on a dominant performance, stopped Kosei Tanaka, but there's a feeling that he may not be as fortuitous a few years later opposite the ring, the very statuesque Junto Nakatani. Junto's a big boy for flyweight and super flyweight, physically imposing dimensions.
Physical dimensions.
It's been boiling down to flyweight. He's set to move up to super flyweight now, and I've no doubts that he'll be a stronger, more menacing fighter, menacing puncher as a super flyweight, not having to cut the extra pounds.
Because he's young.
And he's big, at least for super flyweight, as far as super flyweights go. Kazuto Ioka is coming off of his failed attempt to unify titles with newly crowned WBA super flyweight champion Joshua Franco.
That fight ended in a draw, and a lot of people feel that Kazuto Ioka was quite fortunate that the fight ended in a draw, because you could have given the fight to Joshua Franco.
A fight where Kazuto had every conceivable advantage. You know, it had been some time since Joshua Franco had a fight. He was coming off a lengthy stint of inactivity.
Kazuto had that working for him.
The fight was in Kazuto's neck of the woods in Japan, in the land of the rising sun.
Kazuto had that working for him.
But alas, he was unable to see himself crowned a unified super flyweight champion, and he's currently under orders to satisfy his mandatory in Junto Nakatani, leaving him with very little options. I don't think he's at liberty to pursue a unification match with a Juan Francisco Estrada.
Or run it back with Joshua Franco.
The order for Kazuto Ioka to satisfy his mandatory in Junto Nakatani has already come down. It came down a few weeks ago.
Last month on the 9th.
The grace period, the free negotiation period between the two teams, It's reaching its deadline. It's just a few days away upon issuance of the letter.
They gave those guys 30 days to reach a deal. If they don't reach a deal, it goes to a purse bid.
That's assuming Kazuto even wants to hang on to that WBO title. He might make the decision to move up in weight and see about picking up a vacant title up there at bantamweight. See about becoming a 5-division champion.
Naoya Inoue unified all the belts at 118 pounds, and he subsequently vacated them to see about becoming a 4-division champion. He's set to move up to super bantamweight. He's currently in negotiations to take on Stephen Fulton. But that means that 4 belts are up for grabs at 118 pounds now that he's vacated them.
So who's to say that Kazuto Ioka don't skip out on defending the WBO super flyweight title to see about becoming a bantamweight champion?
I'm just bouncing ideas around because this is a very dangerous fight.
There are legitimate concerns here, and because the WBO's order has already come down, I don't think that Kazuto Ioka has the luxury of petitioning for WBO super champion status that would have allowed him to move up to bantamweight as the next man in line. The next man in line for a title shot. I don't think he has that luxury because the order's already come down. It's too late.
He can vacate now and decide that he's going to move up, but I don't know that he'll be fast-tracked to a title shot the way he would be if he had WBO super champion status.
It's also important to note that Kazuto Ioka is already a very accomplished fighter, and I think that often gets overlooked in the West. This is a 4-division champion.
He gave Kittipang Zhang his first professional loss, a notariable scalp at that time at those weights.
Picked up another notariable scalp in Juan Carlos Rebeco. He won a unanimous decision against McWilliams Arroyo and against then unbeaten Javier Cintrón.
He knocked out Ashton Pelicte, who scared Dani Nietes into an early retirement. He knocked out then unbeaten 3-division champion Kosei Tanaka.
More recently, he avenged his decision loss to Dani Nietes in their rematch.
He schooled him.
He's a very accomplished fighter. He's an accomplished guy, a 4-division champion with some very good scalps, solid scalps at the lower weights.
I think that's worth some consideration.
Currently, Kazuto Ioka is ranked on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list in the middle tier. If he vacates that WBO title, he will be ejected from the list per the rules that govern it. No fighter absent of a world title, irrespective of what their track record is, no fighter absent of a world title is allowed to maintain a rank. The list is only for winners and only for champions. Emphasis on champions in this instance.
Reigning champions, current reigning champions, not former champions.
We're going to see what it is exactly Kazuto Ioka decides to do, because so far they haven't reached a deal yet.
And if he ends up chucking that belt, he's off the list until he can get another one.
Perhaps at another weight.
Big bang, silly Zhang. You're going to get banged by the juggernaut.
Sorry, mate. I don't know about bang. 不知道是你的坦克硬，还是我的穿甲弹厉害。到时候我们赛场见喽。
Well, those two boys seem happy. This is a very interesting fight. The fight between unbeaten WBO interim champion Joyce and Big Bang Zhang of China.
Coming off that career-best performance against unbeaten Filip Hrgovic, by all rights, Zhilei Zhang, he should be an unbeaten fighter, but he didn't get the nod. He didn't get the decision.
Once again, running towards the fire, the heart of danger. A lot of people, they didn't want nothing to do with Filip Hrgovic when the IBF ordered that fight between Filip and Luis Ortiz and Filip and Joseph Parker. Several of the guys ranked in their rank standings, they combed those ranks 2 times, looking for somebody willing to share the ring with Filip for what was an IBF final eliminator in order to install an IBF mandatory challenger. And Zhilei Zhang, he was the only one who was willing.
The only one who stepped up.
And it didn't work out, but here he is yet again, taking on another high-risk opponent.
Rewards about the same. That fight was for an IBF interim title. This fight with Joe, it's for a WBO interim title.
Smoking Joe Juggernaut Joyce is 37. Zhilei Zhang, he's 39, 2 years older. Both these guys,
they get prostate exams.
And if they don't, they should, because at that age, you need to.
It's a good fight.
Conducive towards keeping the momentum going for Joe Joyce, who is still looking to add to his name value, set to go down on the 15th of April at the Copper Box Arena.
That says it all right there.
You know, very recently, Frank Warren was asked what he thought about Anthony Joshua's upcoming fight with Jermaine Franklin, and in so many words, he poo-pooed on the fight, stating that he would have preferred that Anthony Joshua fought his man, Joe Joyce.
Joe, who's fighting at the Copper Box.
Frank said those would be, quote-unquote, easy fights to make, and they would if you do what you've got to do to make them.
The Americans don't know what I'm hinting at.
You want to make a fight between Joe Joyce and Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's the A side. It's as simple as that. So if you want to get him in the ring, you've got to send Joe over. And I don't think for a second Frank is comfortable with the idea of sending his unbeaten up-and-comer, even if he is 37 years old. I don't think he's comfortable with the idea of sending Joe over to Matchroom. But in many ways, Frank would have to if you want to make a fight with Anthony Joshua, because Anthony's a guy who's fought anywhere from Madison Square Garden in New York to the O2 Arena in London, to Wembley Stadium, to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Your guy's fighting at the Copper Box.
I don't know what I mean by that. The Copper Box Arena seats just a little more than the Hulu Theater does at Madison Square Garden. The Hulu Theater's capacity is what, 5,000 seats?
For boxing?
The Copper Box Arena seats approximately 7,000, little over 7,000 people.
For boxing?
For boxing. You got a lot of guys running around saying that Frank Warren has reclaimed the throne as the premier promoter in the United Kingdom, and because of
what?
Because Joe's fighting at the Copper Box.
Are you kidding me?
Don't misunderstand me. I love this fight. I love Joe Joyce versus Zhang as a fight, but you guys are playing the Copper Box.
So if your promoter's serious about putting you in the ring with Anthony, he'd have to send you over to Matchroom.
You would, because you're fighting at the Copper Box Arena. You fighting at the Copper Box Arena on the heels of your big win, your knockout win over Joseph Parker. You know what that tells me? That tells me you're not on Anthony Joshua's stratosphere in terms of drawing power, marquee value. And let's not be coy about this.
If Frank Warren felt he could sell out the O2 or Wembley or one of those places with this fight, then he tried to.
If he felt that this fight, that Joe Joyce had that kind of drawing power, but he knows better, and that's why it's at the Copper Box.
I'm not against the fight.
I don't think you guys are either. I'm just telling you that we all know how this works. If you do want to make a fight with the Joshua guy, you've got to send him over. And I don't think for a second Frank's about to do that.
So then what's he doing?
Promotion by way of name association.
It's not a knock on Joe.
It's certainly not a knock on this fight. I like this fight, but I ain't stupid either.
Want to do a fight with Anthony? You've got to go to him.
Now, if Joe could put on another performance like the one that he just put on opposite the ring Joseph Parker, that will lend itself towards Joe's marquee value moving forward, but he isn't now.
He ain't the A side to know Anthony Joshua.